CNBC's Squawk Box erupted earlier today when two of their hosts, Andrew Ross Sorkin and Joe Kernen, started arguing about who had taken things seriously over the past few months and who had not.
You panicked about the market, panicked about COVID, panicked about the ventilators, panicked about the PPE, panicked about ever going out again, panicked that we'd ever get back to normal.
Joseph, you didn't panic about anything.
What good is it? Why not help people
died.
Keep their head? I understand that.
100,000 people died, Joe, and all you did was try to help your friend, the president. That's what you did. Every single morning on this show. Every single morning on this show, you have used and abused your position, Joe.
That's totally unfair.
You have used and abused your position.
I'm trying to help investors keep their cool, keep their heads, and as it turned out, that's what they should have done. That's what they should have done. They should have kept their heads. If they had listened to you, Andrew, we're supposed to be at about 8,000.
I wasn't arguing to go sell your stocks, Joseph. I was arguing about people's lives.
We understand.
People's lives.
Andrew,
that's
it's a global pandemic.
Do the news. I'm begging you to do the news, Joseph.
It's a global pandemic.
I'm begging you.
Andy.
Please.
Now, really fast, I don't know either of those hosts. I don't watch CNBC because, like most Americans, I'm not super invested in the stock market. I'm begging him to no longer do the news, actually, that individual. But that was a great back and forth. I mean, that guy, Joe Kernen, the one who was like, you were panicking about all this stuff, saying that, like, man, that guy, Andrew Ross Sorkin, he really lost it. And him losing it potentially endangered the stock market. And then he's pointing out, 100,000 people died. I was losing it, and you should have been losing it. And the thing is, we saw in that guy what you see from so many people when you force them to briefly acknowledge how many people have died. Because as Jer and I were talking about before the show, Media Matters analysis of 36 hours over the last couple of weeks of Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, and Tucker Carlson. Over those 36 hours, there have been 5 acknowledgments of how many people have died, which is just insane. How do you not accidentally say it more often? He says, I understand that. And on some level, perhaps he does. But do you think he actually thinks about it in the way that you should, considering the magnitude of how many people have died? I mean, how many Afghanistan wars is that? How many 9/11s? It's multiple Vietnams. It took over a decade of in the jungles fighting to kill half as many people as have just died in 2 months from this thing rampaging across the country. And that guy's fear is that Andrew Ross Sorkin might have temporarily hurt the stock market's recovery as he was panicking about more people dying.
This was the division of a couple of guys who are usually on, and I don't watch them closely, but Andrew Ross Sorkin still, he still has the concern for the markets and the investors and all that stuff. And then this is when the divisions start happening between people who usually put that above everything else, but then this is a new everything else that we're now being dealing with right now. And Sorkin is basically like, well, death kind of starts to make me wonder if I should continue to just push this as a financial issue or an investor issue. And even so, he's addressing those issues with the death and the pandemic and the effect on the markets to say, hey, this is serious, not to cover it up. Because, I mean, Joe Kernen said the same thing. He's like, yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that the investors don't freak out. Who else said that? Donald Trump said that. He goes, the reason why we're going to subdue these things is to make sure that people don't freak out. He said it multiple times. So it does kind of it checks out. The best part about that whole exchange was when Sorkin called out Kernen and said, hey, you just been covering for your friend, the president. And there was this, not silence because he kept talking, but if you look at the accused face, he was like, oh, what do I say? Wow. You really brought that up, Andrew? You really brought that up? Like, this is supposed to be something that stays between them, but it got super personal. And once it gets personal, some revelations start flying.
Yeah, and like you said about not wanting to spook the stock market, like a report came out a couple weeks ago that, was it Jared Kushner was being pushed to purchase more PPE early on, and they were like, no, we're not going to buy a bunch of that because that's going to scare people. Even though it was, of course, much needed. I want to show you one more exchange. Immediately after that video, here is how Joe responded to the attacks from Andrew.
Pandemic, Andy, where per capita deaths, we're down near the low end of per capita deaths. We're nowhere near per 100,000. Most places are at 60 deaths per 100,000. We're at 29. So it's terrible that we've lost 100,000 lives. It's terrible. But it was never going to be that we weren't going to come back and that we weren't going to return to normal. And, siding with Ackman and everything else that, giving credence to all that panic didn't help any investors at all, or people with their anxiety and everything else. So that's why we're here, to try and navigate people through, not trying to help Donald Trump.
Okay. Well, he's focused on what's important, not panicking investors. What's important.
I remember we had this line we always say, the world changed on 9/11. You know what we've been doing ever since the world changed on 9/11? You can no longer go to the gate and watch your family members literally fly away.
Yeah.
Things changed because we lost Americans in a brutal way, and we want to avoid that. This is very simple. Do you want to avoid losing Americans in a brutal, broad way, like we're doing right now? Take necessary precautions and changes to the way we do things. Our lives are different. TSA is in existence now. You walk through this damn thing in the airport where you put your hands over your head and the thing sweeps by. You don't know what the hell it just went through your body, but we do it, and if you don't want to do it, hey, drive from New York to LA. Don't take a flight. There's other options, right? You'll hear that if someone says, I'm not going to go through those protocols. Hey, there's protocols once the world has changed. So when Joe then at the end of that says, hey, we're going to get back to normal, there's a possibility that there's a new normal. And that's just the way it is. And we have to prepare and plan for that and not just go, hey, money's on the line, therefore let's not do it. Money's on the line with airlines too, but we have to change the way we did things. You think people weren't afraid to fly after 9/11? Come on.
Yeah, and the fact that, man, that guy, he can pretend for about 2 seconds to care, and then it's right back to, we can't panic the investors. We can't panic the investors. The thing is, man, if there's anything that's going to recover in America, it's the stock market. Doesn't matter what's happening to the rest of us. Doesn't matter how many people are unemployed. Doesn't matter how many people are dying. Somehow it always bounces back. And if you watch that full segment between those two, both of them, in one way or another, acknowledge that they have no idea how the stock market has bounced back when nothing else has. Even they are astounded by the fact that whatever it is, somehow, the way it's set up, you and I can be screwed, we can lose our jobs, we can lose our homes, we can be dead in the street. They're going to be just fine, somehow. But even despite that, it's sheer invincibility in the face of the worst domestic crisis we've had in our life. Don't panic the investors. Don't acknowledge that nurses need masks. Don't, it might panic them. It might briefly go down and then go back up again because it doesn't make any sense because it's not really based on anything.
Isn't that weird? No one ever says, don't panic the minimum wage workers.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to. They're panicked.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.